Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Good morning, depending on where you're located. I'm going to kick this off for today's first accounting Q&A. We're going to go through a few slides, and then I'm going to pass this over to Julia, who will be doing the Q&A for you all. So as I mentioned, today we're going to go over our first accounting Q&A webinar, and that's going to be with our consultant partner, Julia Nikishima. A little bit about her and her firm: bookkeeping and accounting support, including CFO services for large and small businesses, specializing in unique and complex accounting needs of interior design firms and showrooms, comprehensive procurement services for designers and showrooms. And so it will be important during this webinar to input all of your questions in the control panel box as shown here on the right side. So that's how she's going to first get to your questions. So type them in there throughout the hour that you have with her and really utilize that hour. Julia, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Okay, I can. Fantastic. So I'm going to switch it over now to Julia's screen. Give me just a second to do that. And then in just a moment, we should all be viewing Julia's screen, which I do see now of your lovely two girls.
Oh, hold on. Sarah, it needs to be on the other screen.
Do you want to try on this screen, or what would you like? You got it?
Hold on.
Okay, now we see. Yep. Now
studio. Oh, perfect. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are. We are trying something different today by hosting a live accounting Q&A. So typically when I've done the webinars with Studio Designer, it's 30 minutes of content and then 30 minutes of questions. And a lot of times there's more questions than there's time for. So as Sarah had mentioned, there is a question box for you to type your questions in. I'll have the ability also to unmute users as they are asking questions if they're not clear to me. Please try to be as clear and as specific as possible. I'll also be able to obviously use my test database and explain anything that you may have questions on, and we will go from there. So remember, please type the questions in, and I'll just go through them from the top and select the users or the attendees if need be, and correspond with you live that way. So Rosemary has a question. How do you handle vendor store credits that are used to pay furniture orders? The credits are not related to item returns, but are commission related. So instead of receiving an actual commission check from the vendor, for example, on project A or project Smith, you are receiving a store credit. So it really depends on how you're utilizing your projects, your project worksheets and your profit reports. I would probably still like to see that related, the commission related to the project I received it for, if possible. And obviously, so I'm just going to pick, I have a couple of favorites in my test database. You could always enter an item and enter it so the vendor, our favorite, always number one, first dibs. The reason I'd like to tie it to a project if possible, because it'll affect my profitability. It'll be a credit from a vendor that I didn't pass along to the client. So I would, again, if possible, tie it back to the original client, even if you need to split it up. So I would put in store credit. I'm assuming that this is getting shipped to Mr. and Mrs. Clinton. Furniture is my sales code, room, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And let's say I have a $5,000 store credit. I would do something like this, and then I would do save and close, and I would add this to an existing PO, to a purchase order, and I would keep this purchase order running, obviously, and live in my system, and then apply it against other orders to that same vendor, even if it's in a different job. So that to me would be the cleanest way. Another way is you can enter an item, of course, with a zero selling price. I'm sorry, zero purchase price. And then in the notes, you would be able to put in the vendor description, right, store credit. That'll then show up on the profitability of the current job that you use the store credit commission with. So again, just depends on how you look at reports a little bit. Missy, this is a great question. At what point does an item go on your income statement? Yes, this is at the time of invoicing. So in Studio, would you like to save changes? No, not today. So you go to your general ledger. So as a reminder, when you enter an item into Studio, just an item like this one that we just did, this negative $5,000, there is no general ledger, there are no general ledger transactions that occur. Nothing happens when you enter an item. When you select that item and you put it on a proposal, this one has a zero selling price, still, nothing happens, nothing in your general ledger. As soon as you start selecting items to be added to orders, invoices, and then applying payments, you'll start creating general ledger transactions. So putting an item on an order creates work in progress. Create an order. Applying money to the order. Rosemary, we'll get to your next question right here. Applying money to an order creates vendor deposits. And so actually, let's take a look at that. And applying money to the client side creates client deposits. So if you look at your balance sheet, under vendor deposits, we have $182,000. And this is everything that's on all dollars tied to purchase orders for items that have not been invoiced. And this right here is all dollars, client dollars, tied to proposals on items that have not been invoiced. As soon as you invoice it, it'll reverse itself. Studio will do this for you on the back end in your general ledger. It'll reverse itself out of client deposit, out of vendor deposit, and become cost of goods sold and revenue. But that's a really great question. I know that can be a little bit confusing, especially for any user that's coming from QuickBooks or any Intuit type of product. How do we post in money out? So you could post money out a number of different ways. It would depend on if you're using money out to post to purchase orders or if you're using money out to post to administrative expenses. So under accounting, money out, you always have these two options at the top. So first it's asking you, well, to what ledger do you want to post to? Your credit cards, your cash ledgers, all of the above are up here. So if we want to post to Chase Business Checking and we want to go to anything related to office or administrative expenses on your income statement, you would go to here. Should we select first? It says my favorite. Depends on if you're printing checks or if you're doing everything electronically. Obviously your payment code print will put everything in your print screen, and I'm actually going to show you both. I think at this point in time we have a lot of clients, more and more clients are shifting to bill pay, so the printing option is not as popular as it used to be, but there's definitely offices, for example, who still have a large amount of check runs. Travel. So this is your expense account. So if you're posting in money out and you're posting to anything administrative, all of your administrative expenses will be at the bottom. So auto, business, entertainment. I'm going to select travel. I'm going to say we spent $1,500 and I'm going to go to save and close. When you're in money out, whether you're in money out for office payments or order payments, it is always a two-step process. And anything entered in money out then populates down here. And this is your pending payment section. And when you have something in pending payments that's waiting to be processed, one of these options lights up and becomes red. So because I made this code, right? So if we go back into my pencil button, the payment code is set to print, meaning we actually want to print the live check. That's why print checks shows up. So in this scenario, you would put in your first check number. You would hit print checks. You would have to select which check form suits the checks that you already have. This work you should typically do when you're setting up Studio to compare which of these check forms matches the checks that you're going to put in your printer. I always like to preview mine. Okay, looks great. It's going to print. And then as soon as I did that, it switched itself, and the pending payments now say you need to post your printed check. Unless you hit post printed, it will not populate into your general ledger. So once I hit post printed, you could then go in and find it in your GL. Posting order payments is similar. So you could post order payments one of two ways. You could do it through money out here, order payments. You would select your, let's see, so I think we put that first dibs item on a purchase order. You would select any of the items you needed to pay. You could select deposit balances, you could select partial balances, you could put in $10 into here. And in this scenario, I actually don't want to print. I want to process an ACH payment. So I'm going to put an ACH with today's date. And I'm going to create a check entry for Bank of America. It told me, okay, remember, even though you went through these steps, it still didn't post into your ledger. You'd have to go back to money out. And let's say now you're looking for it and you're like, oh shoot, where did it go? It didn't get posted. This cash credit card account is very important. Wherever you are attributing those ledgers, you need to select that specific cash or credit card account to be able to see what transactions you have under pending payments. So here's the one I believe that I did, the 5560. It's right here to 19th century, and I would post manual. Another great way to pay for purchase orders, to post them into your ledgers, actually through the purchase order itself. A lot of times that could be a little bit easier. So I'm back in my item screen. I always that's my go-to. I will always have a tab open in my item screen. As a reminder, you could have more than one tab open at the top. Just select where you want to go, money in, right click, and say open link in new tab. And money in will pop up. But let's say I know that I'm going to order this from First Dibs and I'm going to put my credit card in and they're going to send me a receipt right away. I'm going to select this order. And up here at the top, there are these tabs. And if you select payment, you have the option of posting directly to this purchase order. And again, you could post it in full. It's set to 50%, so they're only taking the deposit. Your from account is which cash or credit card account it came from. I'm going to say this was being paid on the Amex. I am very, very, very particular with my check or reference numbers. So this field populates into the item, and I'll show you where it goes. So I'm paying it with an Amex 091422. I like to make the check reference number as unique as possible so then I can search for it later in the general ledger and make it easier for myself to do so. I'm never caught up here right here on payment type where it says check credit card. To me, that's not as important as the reference number. I always default everything by reference number. That's how I personally like to search. And when you're posting payments in the PO itself, you have two options. You have this button that says create check entries, which then goes into your pending payments in money out. Or, and we'll do it both ways, or you can also post the vendor payment directly. And when you do that, if you hit the blue button that says post vendor payments directly, it'll post directly to the purchase order and it'll post directly into your general ledger. And I'll show you how to see that. So let's do it this way first for 50%. So I'm going to hit post vendor payment. It's under Amex. I go to edit and I go to view payments. Here is my check number. So for example, if I left this check number blank, and a lot of times that does happen, I think especially if people are rushing, this will be blank. And you'll see that you paid for this order, but you won't have any reference as to how. And potentially, yes, you could go into images and attachments and see, oh, did I upload the receipt? Okay, maybe. If you're unique in your check number and you reference it with AM for American Express, BOA Visa for Bank of America Visa, if you come up with a naming process that works for you, this will really help you identify how you paid for something. And then I always copy and paste this again if I have a question and I go into my general ledger, take out my date field, and then I'll be able to see, oh, okay, well, here's my check number and I did pay for it on the American Express. So I personally find that very, very helpful. If I'm back in my item screen, I'd like to pay for the rest of this order, but I would like to put it into vendor payments. So I'm going to go back the pending payments. If I go into order and I go into payment, and I'm going to pay it again with the American Express because they emailed me back and said, oh, you need to pay this in full. I'm giving it another unique reference number. And instead of hitting the blue button that says post vendor payments, I'm going to hit this button that says create check entries. It's going to ask me, are you sure? My answer, of course, is yes. And if you see, with the last time we did this and we hit post vendor payments, this payment posted right away. But right now, because we put it into the pending payment screen, nothing actually happened yet in the general ledger. You would have to go to money out. Remember to select your right liability account. And here it is down here. It's actually set to print, which I wouldn't want it to. I'd like it to be set to manual. Here's my unique check number. Save and close. And now it lit up post manual. So as soon as I post manual and I refresh this screen, I'm now showing that this item is paid in full. If you go back into edit and view payments, you'll be able to see the two payments, and hopefully the check number will help you understand how this order was paid for in full. So Rosemary, hopefully that answered your question. There's always, we always get questions a lot of times about the difference between vendor deposits and vendor payments, and why sometimes when you're paying for a purchase order and clients are paying for proposals, the payment populates in one section over the other. Vendor deposits tie back into your balance sheet. So that number we saw over here, this vendor deposit, and the same with client deposit. If there's money applied to an order and that order doesn't have an invoice, it'll live in vendor deposits. And the same on the client side. If there's money applied to a proposal and that item does not have an invoice, those payments from the client will live in client deposit. For this item was already invoiced once we applied payments. So the payments automatically went to vendor payments instead of vendor deposits. And on the client side, and actually we could do this example. So 96 under Clinton, money in. So remember that money in is a lot more permanent than money out. We like to tell this, I stress this to all of our users, actually fairly often. You cannot delete or void it. In the general ledger, you'll see it, and actually we should take a look at it now. So they paid with a unique check 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. They paid for this in full, $43.94.50. Payment type is check. I'm going to deposit into Citizens Bank. I have a lot of bank accounts in here. Whoa. So because this item is invoiced, if I refresh this item screen, the client payment automatically went up here into client payment and not into client deposit. And that is because it's invoiced. So if you go into your general ledger and you type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, here's our cash receipt. But there's no way to void or delete this. that option doesn't exist here. So you would have to go back into money in and reverse this actual transaction. So I always like to tell all of our users and designers that we work with to be as meticulous as possible in money in. And Studio does a great job of double checking your math, especially because if something in this box doesn't line up to this box, you will not be able to post a payment. So if there's a discrepancy, it will not let you move on. So hopefully that'll be one more double check for you to say, oh, okay, well, shoot, let me see if I'm applying it to the right items, because then reversing it, actually we could do that. So this is one item, so it's not 43.94.50. Let's say this check bounced. I would actually put, so let's say it's a day later and I got a notification from my bank, and this would become a negative because I'm reversing this transaction. So I originally put the deposit into Citizens, but Citizens notified me that this client didn't have enough money in their account and they bounced the payment. So I would have to go in and reverse that transaction on the item level. Another really popular question actually that we receive often is, how do you find how money was applied in money in? And if you go to reports, so I went to reports and all reports, go to payment application, and you have two options here. This is how you would view money applied from the client, and you could view it in two ways, by item or by date. I personally prefer by date, so we're just going to put in the Clintons, and that way you'll really be able to see, and this is how you would find discrepancies too. So these were payments made in the previous years, you could see in 21, and then here's what we did today. Excuse me. And actually my description populated on here as well, and you could search for this description in your general ledger. So here's the positive and here's the negative. So remember, if this report isn't favorited in your reports, you should absolutely be using this when answering any type of client-related money questions, or even for yourself. If you see that they have money on account in client retainer, and you're wondering why, this would be the report to pull. A lot of people also ask us, and this is coming from a user as well, what do we do? Do we always, so there's in money in, there's all these options at the top. And when you're a newer user, I know it could become very confusing. So Studio defaults to receive and apply. It'll always default to receive and apply. That is the most common type of payment. And what that means is you're receiving money into this cash account and you're applying it to these items below. So down here. So in our example, right, we filtered by this proposal. And when you do this, let's take this proposal out and see what's open. When you receive and apply, the dollar value in this box needs to equal the dollar value applied in the items below. So this actually has a payment on it, but I'm going to pay it again. So when I do that, and they're out of balance, there's this tiny little red message that pops up that people miss. I mean, I've missed it before many times. And it says that this amount must equal to amounts to apply. And these are your boxes of amounts to apply. So I don't necessarily think there's a right and a wrong in terms of should you do receive and apply or the other options, which we'll talk about. But I'm going to double pay this invoice because the Clintons have lots of money for me. And they're paying today with this check. It won't let me do it if it's out of balance. And sometimes this happens. So let's say you receive a large check from a client and a proposal changed by $1 or a couple pennies, or even a couple $100. And then you say to yourself, okay, well, I need my cash balance to be correct, which you do. So should I just receive the client payment? So if you go to receive client payment, this section, apply payment to items, goes away. It's gone. There's no way to get it back. And that's because the system is saying to you, okay, well, if you're receiving client payment, that means you're taking your very large $69.50 and putting it into the cash account. So we're actually going to change this. to $1,000. And it's going to populate into this box, funds available. And as soon as and we're putting it into Citizens because we have way too many bank accounts, and we're doing it on today's date. And as soon as I do that, funds available pops up. So are you able to do that and then go into apply payments to items from funds available? You can, absolutely. And so in this scenario, what else is open? We could put $1,000 on this fabric. I'm actually then going to go back and run that payment application report for you. Where I think this gets confusing, especially if you have clients who, let's say, are particular, or you know they're going to come back to you asking for any type of maybe some kind of audit report or a report explaining to them how you applied all of their funds. So if you do it this way, so you applied it all into funds available, and then you realized that they needed to, it needed to pay for a portion of this fabric. Even when you're posting money from funds available, so you're taking money out of this retainer account, I always use a check number. So I'm from the desktop days where funds available was called client deposit. So I still use the abbreviation client deposit payment, CDP, and today's date. And I'll do the same thing I did on my American Express check number, reference number, where if I have more than one, I'll potentially even start doing 01, 02, 03, 04. And so I'm going to post this payment. But actually, I'm sorry, let me back up. So when you're in apply payment to items from funds available, do you see how this box now is grayed out? Because you're not actually depositing any money into this cash account. That would be the other options. All you're doing is taking money from the funds available account. So that's actually why this is grayed out. You cannot put a dollar value in there. You could also update your descriptions, for example. So it will always populate apply client payment, but you could say client deposit payment, You could say the check number, we said 98765, or maybe it was 9876. So if you hit post payment, it will reduce funds available, and then this item is going to show $1,000. Where this gets a little bit, I think, tricky or sometimes confusing, whether it be for the designer or for the end user, is right here. So when you pull this report and this report becomes, dozens and dozens of pages, this will be really confusing. So you'll see then, oh, I put money into client deposit, and I know that from my abbreviation, receive client payment right here. And then I took it out and paid for this fabric. And you may remember, because you have a great memory, but if it's $100,000 here, and then you're applying it to a proposal for $99,978, and then you'll have some lingering money in funds available. Again, depending on how you look at information and how clients look at information, it may become a little bit more, it may become confusing. So again, no right or wrong for sure. But just make sure that you're always using a check number, even if you're using some sort of abbreviation for client deposit payment. And that'll allow you to see if something was overpaid or underpaid. A lot of times too, if a client is paying for a specific proposal, so let's go back to money in, and we're still in the Clintons. So here's 96. So 96 has this $1,000. So let's say that when I sent them, the Clintons, this proposal for the antique chair was actually $53.94.50. It was more expensive. And they sent me the $53.94.50. And I know by looking in my history tab that I actually reduced the price because the vendor gave me a greater discount. And I want to pass that discount along to a client. I sometimes like to leave that overpayment on the item. It'll help me down the road, and it may help me remember or help me assist a client's client, right? So the designer's client, for them to understand why there's lingering money or why there's overpayments. So if this lives on this item, and I'll go back into here, so receive and apply, $53.94.50. So when I post this payment, I don't want to post it to there. I'm going to post it into Citizens Bank. Post payment. This shows that there's $1,000 that's over. So you could find this in a number of ways. You'll obviously see it on the item itself. Let's go to save and close. Oh, I didn't do my percentages, but so here's my $1,000. You'll see it in money in. You'll see it in any type of project worksheet that you run. So if you're doing some project management and you want to understand what clients have overpaid or underpaid, this is a great report to pull. So the Clintons have obviously not used us for a lot of their purchasing, which they need to do. Here's our store credit that we entered. Oh, I'm sorry, this must be 02. No, 2010, 03. I'll be able to see this $1,000 overpayment. And at that point, I can decide, okay, would I like to put this into client deposit? You could do that back in the money in screen, which I could show you. Would I like to move this money directly to a new item in the Clinton job? Let's say we're going to be furnishing their southern home and they'd like to apply this to a new item. We could do that. We would still need to do that through money in. That general ledger trail would still exist on that client payment application report, and I could show you that. But if they then ever ask me, oh, why do I have $1,000 overpayment in my client deposit account? I would be able to see it a little bit more clearly because I would see that, oh, $5,300 was applied to this antique chair, not $4,300. And then I moved this $1,000. And so we could see that. Let's go back to money in. Go back to our friends, the Clintons. So right, I'm adding a couple more steps where I put the money on, I put the additional money on the item, and then I'm going to move it off. But then I'll always have that general ledger. I'll have those general ledger transactions, so I'll remember what I did. So remember, I use CDP because I'm old. I'm going to post my payment. So this is a negative dollar value. So it's a negative dollar value because this says amount to apply. But I'm not applying necessarily, I'm removing. So to move negative dollars, so you put in a minus up right here, as soon as you hit post payment, funds available becomes positive, and this becomes clean. This now says there's no overpayment on this antique chair. It's living and funds available. I could then take that $1,000 and put it somewhere else. Oh, I'm going to pay for this fabric. Great. Don't forget your check number. Very, 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 very important. Post payment. Watch this funds available box. Let's refresh. It becomes 0. And then let's rerun this report. So go back to reports, go to all payment and application by date. I think it's easier personally. Depends on your purpose, but typically that would be easier. And so now you get to see all these transactions on today's date. You'll see that this check bounced. We had to ask for a new check. They gave us a new check. It was the wrong dollar value. We applied the larger dollar value. So you'll be able to see all this money that's being moved around. So this report, again, could get really, really lengthy with time and obviously with the scope of a job. But that was a really great question. We get that question a lot for sure in money in. This account is set up to default to undeposited funds. It's personally not my favorite. I like the money to go directly into cash, but it does depend on how you, it does depend on how you reconcile and if you batch your deposits or if you make deposits on a check by check basis, if you're making them independently. So this is in settings, and so this test database has a lot of cash accounts. So if we go, let's get out of there. Oh my gosh, so petty cash doesn't count, but we have Chase, we have RH, store credit, which I don't understand why that's a cash account, and Citizens. So actually not as many as I thought. And then there's a couple of credit cards down here. I like to see the deposits personally and individually, because then I'm able, like if there's any discrepancies, to me, it's a little bit easier. And I'm not sure, I think most of our users don't use undeposited funds that regularly. And it depends really on your volume too, if that's helpful to you. But that is why, I don't know if anyone caught that, that's why it's always popping up in here. So if we go to account, like let's go to another screen and then go back in, it's always defaulting to that because that is in your setup in terms of which cash account do you want it to default into. But that is a great question. Something else to consider when you're in items. So if we go back to our credit item, I think it was in this job. If you're moving money between purchase orders, and this is what we would be doing in this case, is we'd be taking money off of this purchase order and putting it on another purchase order with the same vendor. So this is first steps. Oops. I would move any money through Suspense. I wouldn't hit any of my cash accounts. So I would make this Suspense. And let's say, so this was our store credit for this particular job, and we're going to use $2,500 of it. So this is a negative number because this vendor owes us this money. And this is probably my third time saying it, but I'm a stickler for check numbers. I find it extremely helpful. So because I'm moving money through Suspense, I'm doing that. I don't want this transaction in my cash general ledger. I wouldn't want it to populate into really any of them, any of my cash accounts, because then I have to reconcile them. And for example, you may forget, it may be confusing to look at. So if you use Suspense, it will stay out of your cash recs. I always abbreviate Suspense by these three right here. And then I put in today's date as always. And I'm going to bypass create check entries, but unless I just hit it accidentally. And I'm going to hit post vendor payments. So as soon as I post this vendor payment, this $2,500 will live in this Suspense account, and we should zero it out. And to find it, actually, I'll show you how to find it. If you're like, shoot, I don't remember. Did I move? Where did I put this money? So post vendor payment. And so to Rosemary's question, let's go to First Tips and see if there's anything open. That's a larger dollar value. We may have to create an item. Maybe we could make one in 19th Street. What is this? Non-billable. Red pretty large pillow. That's actually how I enter items. My descriptions are awesome. So we're going to make this non-billable vase. Non-billable vase. Accessories. It's going in bedroom 1. My item number 10. And it was $3,500. And the freight's going to stay at $250. So here's my new item. I'm going to put it on a purchase order. So remember, as soon as I do that, this created a general ledger transaction. And I wanted to use my store credit. So I'm going to go to payment. I'm going to go to Suspense. I'm going to use my same check number because it'll help me tie this transaction in the general ledger. I only have $2,500 of store credit. I'm going to hit post vendor payment. Where's my base? And here it is. And so whenever I use Suspense, I always double check myself. I actually am wondering if I accidentally stuck something in here and money out. So Suspense is not a cash account. If on your chart of accounts, it should be listed as an asset, but that doesn't mean it's listed as a cash account, right? So you have to select this button for something, for an account in your chart of accounts to actually be a cash account. So Suspense isn't, and it's defaulted that way into the system. So if you're ever looking for something in money out, that's not a direct, that's not a cash or a credit card account, you have to select this button that says view all accounts. And as soon as you do that, you'll be able to see Suspense. Oh, okay, I didn't mess up. I thought I hit create the entry. But I want to double check my work. So I would go into the General Ledger tab. I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to filter by Suspense. And I want to see the debit and the credit in here. And it's right here. So here's my credit for $2,500 and here's my debit for $2,500. So if you're looking at, for example, this is our item that we paid with the credit, you could reference that down here, paid with commission, credit on PO, blah, blah, blah. And here's my order, 200,285. So if I hit save and close, but in my general ledger, I'll be able to see that too. So if I hit on the edit pencil button, I'll be able to see this order number. This is the new order number. And because I know my Suspense transaction, the check ID, I'll then also be able to see where it came from, 200,284, and this is from that job. So that check ID is really, really important. It'll help you anytime you reference anything. So if you got out of there, you'll be able to see that, and you'll be able to see both sides. So you'll see that you moved money from this PO into Suspense, and then you moved money from Suspense to this other PO. As even a secondary, or really a third checkpoint, you can reconcile Suspense. So you should be reconciling all of your cash and credit card accounts, which is right here. It's always a popular question. You should, in theory, be doing it monthly as time allows. And here's Suspense. And here are your transactions. So Suspense should always equal 0. Actually, as you could tell in here, there is something that looks like it's out of balance. I'd have to look it up in my general ledger to see what caused it. But these debits and credits, just like when you are reconciling a void in your cash account, if you're someone or if you're a firm who uses Suspense often, I would absolutely recommend that you reconcile it. It'll allow you to really see which mistakes, or if any, that you have. And again, this happens if you're rushing, right? If you're moving money from one PO to another, as an example, and you get distracted if the phone rings, etc., and you don't remember what you did, I would go to your general ledger, put in Suspense, and then see, oh, is there a debit? Is there a credit? What did I forget? And then at the end of the month, when you're doing your reconciliations for all your cash and credit card accounts, maybe you don't need to do it monthly. I would say it depends again on volume, but definitely check in on this account in the actual reconciliation screen at least quarterly, and then absolutely at the end of the year, just to make sure that it balances. It'll populate on your general, on your balance sheet also. So at end of the year, when you pull your balance sheet, and here's my what was that, a visual comfort transaction? Something with visual comfort in this order is not correct. And I don't know, without doing some digging, I don't know enough about it to understand why it's here, but it's missing a corresponding debit. A lot of times we will use Suspense for questions too. So if I don't know where a transaction goes, whether it be in money out, especially for office expenses, or if you don't know if something, for example, should be an item, let's say you ordered something from Amazon, you ordered light bulbs, and you're not sure because somebody else in the office did it, should that be an actual office expense or should that be an item? You could throw it into this account. Oh, I have to select a vendor. First dibs. You could select Suspense down here as well, and that'll always allow you to say, oh, so ACH, I'm going to use my citizens. It was just an ACH for today. Unknown. $125. I do save and close and Citizens Bank. And here it is, post manual. Oh, I put it into first dibs. I should probably change it. Almost done. Save and close. If I hit post manual and then I go back into my reconciliation screen, this will live in here. And so I don't want to reconcile this, right? This isn't its last ending place. But this is a really great way if you only have a couple transactions and you're working your way through a bank or credit card rec to post something and then keep going and then know that you won't lose sight of it. It'll live on your balance sheet forever until you do something with it. So if there are no other questions for today.
Yeah, I'll just step in here, Julia. This is Sarah. I'll just step in. If anyone has any other questions, please submit them now. Otherwise, we'll go ahead and end today's call. So now's your time to put in those questions. Okay. All right. Well, I guess that's it for today. Thank you so much, Julia.
Oh, you're welcome.
Absolutely. So I'm going to share my last slide here with Julia's contact information and the support team's contact info, and we should all be seeing that now. So to reach Julia directly, her email is julia@newagefinancialconsulting.com with her phone and website. And then as always, you can reach the support team. Their email is support@studiodesigner.com. Also through chat and phone. All right. Thanks again, Julia.
Thank you, Sarah. Everyone have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.